So I'm sitting there pondering. I don't have a drinking shtick like the critical drinker, so let's just say I'm completely sober. I am listening to the Court of the Crimson King while shucking jackfruit, though. That's not double speak for anything, it's literally what I was doing just before writing this script. I even made a small mess on the floor that I'd cleaned not 30 minutes prior. FML, am I right? Anyway, I realized that I have to get to work on my Strange New Worlds Episode 10 review for all 5 people who might be interested in it. I did have trouble though. This episode had me a little more confused than a recent YA show that climaxes on a dude dancing with a girl at her debutante ball. Now this is normal in and of itself for a YA show, even played some hokey Taylor Swift song. But as if that wasn't bad enough, this is all after this dude took over the dance because his brother, the original partner for this girl, had run off to cry because he had just discovered his mother was dying of cancer. That's no joke. It was weird. I liked the To All the Boys I Loved trilogy better. Anyway, back to this Trek episode. I can safely say that this is the best new Trek show I've seen to date. It felt more like a proper Trek show than anything released in the last 15 years. And it actually had a roundtable discussion about both sides of an argument, mainly whether the Enterprise wanted to commit to possibly starting a war or not. But then there's still misfires for this episode, so let's get to it. We open with Pike in a meeting with the commander of an outpost on the edge of the Romulan neutral zone. He's cool and collected until a child that Pike recognizes from the future accident that'll scar him walks in. Pike just about has a conniption and rudely walks out. Later, in his quarters, he realizes that the show hasn't had a proper time travel episode this entire season, so he works to remedy this by writing a letter to the kid to try and dissuade him from getting involved in the future accident. A voice cuts the silence from behind him, and Ebenezer Pike turns to find himself facing the ghost of future Pike, who comes from the future with the help of Klingon time crystals to warn of the dangers of messing with time. Hey, we already messed with the Gorn from the classic episode Arena. Several times, I might add. Oh, and we covered Amok Time and redid the whole concept of Pon farr. Are we going to desecrate another classic? Why, yes. Tribbles again? Or is it Charlie XCX? No. We brought you to the Romulan neutral zone for a reason. Ah, yes, the enemy below. Wait, no. The enemy that's cloaked? Speaking of the enemy within, I don't remember having a transporter malfunction recently. Maybe that's for season 2. We did have a body swap episode, so maybe mind melds are the new transporters. So Pike leaps into himself quantumly and tries to figure out what all went wrong. He's still captain of the Enterprise in the future. Everything looks fine. Then we begin to play out Balance of Terror, the episode where a cloaked Romulan ship is destroying outposts along the Federation border. Things are playing out in a similar fashion, only now there's another ship along with the Enterprise, Kirk's ship, the Farragut. Okay, there's only the Enterprise again. But Pike does damage the Romulan ship and a 2-hour ceasefire is declared. The Romulan commander is in an argument with his second-in-command about attacking or fleeing once they repair. He chooses to fix the engine and then later the weapons if possible. Perhaps this means peace is possible. Once the 2 Romulan hours are up, the 2 ships face each other. Pike sues for peace, saying that maybe they don't need to fight. However, a Romulan armada warps in with the Praetoress on board. She declares that she will go to war with the Federation over their attempts at peace because it shows that humans are weak. Never mind that the humans managed to fight to a ceasefire 100 years earlier, and that the Federation is now aware of the cloaking technology of the Romulans, along with the limits of both that and their plasma torpedo technology, or that the Romulans don't know anything beyond that the Federation is asking for peace. For all they know, the Federation might be pretending to want it just to get the Romulans to foolishly invade or be complacent until they get their teeth kicked in. They also don't know if the Enterprise is just a frigate and that there isn't a freaking Warhammer 40k fleet about to pulverize some pointy-eared butt. Oh, and let's think about the wider canon for a moment. Let's focus on the last 15 years of new Trek if you don't want to consider the original 6 series. Let's remember when the humans wanted to conquer the galaxy. The Terran Empire was born out of the ashes of World War III to conquer the Vulcans, the Klingons, and everyone else, even destroying the Klingons' homeworld before the events of Discovery. And Picard, humans curb-stomped the Borg. Yes, the Federation almost lost to the Klingons in this universe for some dumb reason. The Romulans have stayed away from humanity for the last 100 years. It's safe to say they don't know what they are about to face. Anyway, the Federation manages to get away from the fight, and Pike finds out that the war is still raging by the time of roughly the Wrath of Khan, if future Pike's uniform is any indicator. This causes current Pike to tap his time crystals together and whisper, "There's no time like now," and he returns home. He deletes the messages he was preparing and goes to the bridge. It's all song and dance until the eugenics police show up and take number 1 into custody for being genetically engineered. Thus, we have the cliffhanger for season 2. Let's go over some brief thoughts on this. It is certainly more watchable than anything else Paramount has put out Star Trek related since 2009. The action was decent enough, the back and forth was fine at the round table, and Kirk was the least egregious old character to date. But it's pretty much surface level. Rewatching the original Balance of Terror, I had some questions for the showrunners. First, Shattenkirk knew he was expendable and was less willing to fight than this current Kirk. He had some caution in him and knew he couldn't just go in guns blazing. In a lot of respects, Shattenkirk was closer to Anson Pike in this episode, which brings to the forefront, does this mean that Pike is a worse captain than Kirk? Because Kirk didn't start a war, yet Pike did under similar conditions. Also, the Romulan ships in TS were portrayed as somewhat weaker than the Enterprise. The Enterprise was perfectly capable of damaging a Romulan ship and even outrunning it, so the Romulans would be best to rethink the hasty decision to go to war. But even then, another question is, where are Klingons in all of this? In the original series, the Klingons allied with the Romulans within a year or two after the original episode of Balance of Terror. With the Romulan War going on in the future in this timeline, would the Klingons not want to take advantage of this situation? Again, going back to the original series, the Klingons were about to go to war again over Organia within a year or two of this incident, and would actually join an alliance with the Romulans later on and trade technology. Either the Klingons uncharacteristically stayed out of the war for a decade or two, or they allied with the Romulans and still stayed in a stalemate. Then the Klingon time monks helped Pike reset the timeline because Pike was able to get to their planet for some reason. Finally, Uhura's hair is all wrong. This is the worst violation of canon so far. Literally unwatchable. But on the topic of characters, Pike was just kind of a mirror of Shattenkirk in the original Balance of Terror episode, so it's hard to get mad at him being out of character overall. He did threaten to blow the head off an alien in the original series, but he could have just been under a lot of stress at the time. But Spock is just as brain dead as ever. When confronted with the revelation that Pike is astro projecting from the past, Spock thinks that it's more likely that he is mentally compromised. It irks me because Spock has been through a literal season of time travel with his now forgotten stepsister. There's no reason that the time travel would be less likely than anything else. Otherwise, he didn't cry in this episode, so he's at least got that going for him. There's a vocal cameo of Scotty, although I'm not sure why Sulu isn't at the helm rather than not Sulu. In fact, I don't know why Uhura isn't at the helm rather than not Uhura. Heck, they even missed out with having James Frain play the Romulan commander. So how's this episode stand? 3 out of 5 Romulan Praetors. The episode was fine on the surface, but you can't dig too deep. Now, I'm going to go play some SFC, because that must be where they got the Romulan disruptors from.